This stream is sponsored by Noise Fighters, so if you're in the market for night vision accessories, whether that be their Pano Bridge, J-Arm, or even their new Cliffhang IR riser that's designed for your red dot magnifier and even your laser aiming module, then go ahead and check them out. Once again, that is Noise Fighters. Now, if you need actual night vision devices or other optics, you can also check out Optics Force. They sent out this AGM Gen 2 Plus unit that I've been playing around with. Review coming on that shortly, but you can go ahead and check out both of them at the links in the description or pinned comment. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful night tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking all things medical and a bunch of other fine topics as well with the one and only Blair Dell. Now, before we get into that, while you're here, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as that is all free and does help us out quite a bit. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get Gary on here first. Gary, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing quite all right. It's a nice blustery day, mid 80s. I'm doing pretty good. I recognize about half of those optics that you got in the intro, though. I like that.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think that they originated from somewhere near you, actually, for some reason. But your audio sounds quite a lot better this week as well.
Well, if it is, in fact, better, let me know.
Well, it's definitely better. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get Blair on. Now, if you're not familiar with Blair, he's going to introduce himself, of course, but he started out as a firefighter in Mason County, Washington, and then spent 21 years in the U.S. Navy, with most of his time as a corpsman in the Marine Special Operations Command. So, without further ado, how are you doing, Blair?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's awesome. We really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us about all things medical and a bunch of other fun topics that don't really get discussed all that much, especially on YouTube and social media. So really appreciate having you on. For those of in the audience that aren't super familiar with you or your work, why don't you give us the quick rundown about you?
Fair enough. A good place to start is the beginning. Started out when I was in high school as a volunteer firefighter. Ran away and joined the circus, i.e. the U.S. Navy. Recruiter lied, said something about water and diving. I became a diver and ended up in deserts my whole career with Marine Special Operations Command, Marine Recon, and started out initially with the infantry. For those that aren't familiar, Marines don't have their own medics. They're called corpsmen. They snatch over from the Navy. Some of us sell our souls to the dark side, and we stay over on there. I did 21 years of that, 4 combat deployments, many crazy days and crazy nights. Happy to talk more about it, but that's my last life, my old chapter. Really more excited about what we can do, take those lessons written in my brother's blood overseas, and how we can help each other as a community, as a country, however you want to frame it, to integrate those lessons so hard earned overseas, and put them into our daily lives for our families, our communities, schools, you name it. Now I started a company called 813 Consulting, where I work and get to choose what companies I work with and advocate for them both in the operational medicine space, R&D, development, some sales, and then also work in security and operations. Best way to sum me up in 2 words is I'm a risk navigator. That has a whole bunch of different connotations that I get into quite a deep with some folks. But if you want to hit the I believe button that is a thing, then we can probably move forward and integrate it where we need to. I also volunteer with Washington State Patrol SWAT team as a medic. And I'm a family man, father of 2, been married 28 years, and I'm an avid motorcycle enthusiast.
Awesome. You're basically hitting all of the things right there. So that is awesome. One thing I did want to ask you about actually is about diving. So was diving your main interest when you were starting to go in?
Actually, that was my main interest since middle school. My dad got me I got PADI qualified in Washington State when I was 13 years old. I've been diving all around the world since, culminating as a instructor at Navy Dive Salvage Training Center in Panama City, Florida. That was a great time teaching diving medicine and operational diving, combat, other mixed gas, those sort of things. And end of the day, it was just a great time Unfortunately, I think the Navy kind of dove the fun out of it for me to some degree.
Right.
When you do 1,000 dives a year, you start kind of making it a little more like work. So I don't dive nearly as much as I used to, but certainly was some amazing experiences.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, before we get into some of the more heavier topics, why don't we start off with something that's maybe a little sillier? Hey, Gary, is that a radio I hear in the background coming from you?
Yeah. I thought I'd turn that volume down. Hang on. Let me turn that off. Most important topic that we're going to hit tonight, Blair.
Exactly.
Indians or Harleys?
Well, I ride an Indian, so it's kind of so
that was too quick.
Yeah, that's a kind of given. But there's a lot to unpack there for a lot of fun to be had while you're doing it too. But I will derail an operational medicine cost with going down that rabbit hole.
I'm also an Indian man. Right. Scouts are awesome.
You bike guys. I don't know anything about bikes, so.
And you live now far from Sturgis?
I know. Well, I'm on the east side of South Dakota, so I'm still like 4 or 5 hours from there. But yeah,
they'll still roll through.
Closer than most people. Yeah, for sure. So, very important question. I think most people will think one way or the other about you with this question, and that is, of course, Glock or SIG handguns.
Well, I show SIGs and 1911s and all my sexy guns at the range, but what I carry and what I show to people who need to have high velocity deterrent, I'm just going to show them a Glock. The reliability is what I'm counting on there, and it's where I trained. And a theme we'll see probably tonight is I outfit and equip myself to my consistent level of training.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the sort of response we get from just about everyone. We haven't gotten a SIG answer yet, but maybe one day we'll get a SIG answer.
I can give you I know 2 people off the top of my head that would go that route, and it's because they train with them and they're
yeah. Well, the SIG 226 was a standard carry issue for a long time, wasn't
it? It was, yeah. And they've actually now has become the U.S. Army and U.S. Marine Corps. It's not the 226. They made a specialized one, but is now the Marine Corps and Army's primary weapon.
Yeah, the M18 now is the new one.
Yeah. I can't speak to it too well. It was after I got out, but more power to them. If they make it reliable and people train to it, it's going to be a great weapon for them.
Sure. Yeah, and training is going to be the most important factor on a lot of that stuff anyways. So, next question. What is the most important non-firearm item in your EDC?
I can show you. A flashlight.
A pen? Oh, no, it's a flashlight. What model were we looking at?
You're going to look at a couple. There's a couple different ones. My big thing, though, is no matter whether you're shooting, knifing, or hand-to-hand, or fixing somebody medically, if you can't see what you're doing, it never goes better by braille. So having flashlights pre-staged everywhere is a big part of me. I've got a little HX1 from Coast Lights, a little company out of Portland, $12, magnet, 2 different light settings, all sorts of, and a little clip on the back, and then Coast pen light with a flood and straight.
Interesting.
I've lost count. I think I probably put them through the laundry more than I should, but I've got those in the doors of every vehicle I own, the saddlebags of my bikes, half my jackets have them in a sleeve somewhere. I just have them. They're affordable, reliable, and I have them staged everywhere.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's important too, because some people, they'll buy a $200 or $300 light, but it's the only one that they own. And it's, either in a kit somewhere or somewhere that they don't always have access to it. And that's probably important than having quick access to it wherever you are.
The only time I spend more than $50 on a light is if it's going to go on a weapon for liability. Okay.
Interesting. Gary, you have some crazy handheld flashlights, don't you?
No, I do. I have one crazy handheld flashlight. I get the Streamlight HL5X, which it's basically just a spotlight, so insanely bright.
All right, so moving on to more serious questions, and this is going to be kind of like, what is an EDC medical setup? Because obviously your background is kind of in that medical realm, let's say. And so let's say for just the prepared citizen, what is something that you see is lacking in a lot of people's basic setups, and kind of what your recommended take is.
Fair enough. And probably one of the most common questions I get both in classes, interviews, things like that. The two things that people are lacking the most, and I'm going to start it with training. And by that, I mean consistent training. Most everybody's had a first aid class or something, but when was it? It's perishable skill. I get frustrated when I see people spending how much insane money or time on range time, and then they go to a medical class maybe every 10 years.
Right.
And say, oh, I'll figure it out when it happens. That's just when my family's lives are in the balance. That's not what I call efficient planning. So training is the number one thing that people are lacking in most cases. And it doesn't have to be a huge investment of a 4-day course somewhere. It can be a 4-hour tailored class. There's so many different methodologies out there. Even if you just go and read something, just keep it front of mind and percolate in there. And then when you buy medical gear, especially things like tourniquets, always make sure you buy at least one or rotate out something to be a trainer, so you're practical training with the tools you have.
Sure. Yeah.
Of the equipment that people are missing the most, and I see this in professional kits, first responder kits, everywhere, they're missing blankets.
Okay.
Blanket, we have shown time and time again that hypothermia relevant to trauma, i.e. not because you're freezing in the snow, but because your blood, which regulates your temperature, is sitting on the ground next to you.
Right.
Or worse yet, under you, conducting your heat away. They're not taking that into account in their planning. Even a simple old Mylar blanket, the least effective blanket on earth, the Walmart special little tinfoil one, even that is better than nothing in that case. But also being mindful of getting wet clothing and those sort of things off, being very aggressive with preventing hypothermia in a traumatic patient is huge, and arguably one of the most understated and under equipped and trained problems in trauma that people get around to. As far as to answer your initial question, what was the number one, what do I recommend as an everyday carry kit? I can actually show you because I have these kits everywhere. I didn't have to take but 6 steps to reach and find one in either my kids' backpacks for school, one of the doors of my vehicle, saddlebags. All of my wife's purses have these staged. And it's just a little wallet-looking device here. And in it, you're going to have a hemostatic, a very effective advanced blanket. It's not the standard tinfoil. It's actually a Mylar, stretchier. It's much better and more robust blanket, but still packs down the same size. And a SWAT tee or some sort of stretch tourniquet / pressure dressing, and nitro gloves. All of that fits in here really, really nice. And as far as the hemostatics go, using either Chito-Sam or Quick Clot, some sort of hemostatic they have in there.
Now, could you run through the hemostatic for somebody who knows nothing? What is that going to be used for?
Yeah, one I'm happy to jump into because it's one of those devices. If I'd had it earlier in the war, I'd have good friends that were home instead of flags. The hemostatic, the easiest way to wrap it or to put it in context, is it's one of the few times in your life you can actually buy time. There's a couple different trains of thoughts. There's the Chito-Sam versions, and then there's the Kaolin versions. Either of them, when using this dressing to pack a wound, that's either after a tourniquet's been put on, in a place that a tourniquet can't go, or something that's just the tourniquet isn't cutting it completely. Either way, whenever you have bleeding that needs to be managed, you use this and it speeds up clotting. In the case of Kaolin, it jumpstarts the clotting cascade. In the case of Kaizen, it actually sludges and works from the outside in and makes it stop faster. So to put numbers to that, if I were to if my femoral were cut right now, and someone was to be putting 5 pounds per square inch of pressure in there with packing with normal gauze like my t-shirt, it would stop eventually. Right? At the end of the day, all bleeding stops. Whether you're alive to enjoy it
one way or the other, yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you put 5 pounds per square inch of pressure and packed efficiently, it would take between 10 to 20 minutes, probably an average closer to 15, for that femoral to clot off. With the hemostatics, you're talking 3 to 5 minutes tops. So you're buying time and red blood cells.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a lot of blood still inside you if you can cut it off that much faster.
I'd heard
less severe wounds, it's even faster.
I'd heard that there wasn't a significant, what's the word that I'm looking for? There wasn't a significant mortality difference between efficient packing versus hemostatic. Like, it's always better to have hemostatic than not. But I heard that it wasn't proven to be saving more people.
Yeah, when I hear those statements, it's typically in the older generation of hemostatics that first came out in the early 2000s. The original quick clot that was granular and exothermic in nature, stuff that burned you hear about in the horror stories and stuff, they haven't used that since 2008. There were versions as they were figuring it out that were less effective. But with the current generation of hemostatics, any person who says that it isn't close or is even close to common gauze isn't looking at the human use studies or the peer-reviewed journals.
Okay.
Good. I mean, I'll take your word for it, as well as the backing for it as well. So now all of that sort of stuff, that was basically 4 main items in a relatively small pouch. Do you have a like a specific kit that you go to, or do you like to piece your stuff together a la carte?
As far as for a larger kit?
Well, or just a smaller kit or whatnot. Like, do you have a specific place that you just buy these pre-made kits from, or do you? Yeah.
So I'm actually in that industry. So yeah, I work with certain distributors, BMK Ventures, North American Rescue, direct manufacturers like Sam Medical, Rescue Essentials. There's several different ones that I can advise. But what I prefer to do is, when people are interested in this, get a hold of me and I can get them in touch with the best for each part of it. Because, at the end of the day, this is an industry that needs to make money and stuff. And I got a few of the shortcuts in the past, the cheat codes to make that a little more affordable for you when you build a kit. The one thing I would say, though, to answer your question about size and everything else is, while I do have a big kitchen sink bag, like breakout in the case of the apocalypse, and has all my surgical stuff and everything from my old life's capabilities, that's central in my home. What I count on is these things being staged everywhere, because I can do a lot of good with a little bit when it's everywhere. And then I have a few different kits built for certain things. Like when my SWAT team gets activated, I go with this kit. I've got kits pre-staged in my vehicles, larger kits.
Okay.
So, and based on what those kits do, like the one in my son's vehicle is nowhere near as robust as the one in my wife's vehicle.
Okay. Gotcha. Interesting. Well, that was going to be my next question, is basically, so that's like an EDC style. So is that something like, if I were to see you tomorrow, you would probably have something like that on you?
You'd be hard pressed to ever find me without some sort of weapon and that kit.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So let's talk gear. Since that's what most of the audience here is here for anyways. They like stuff. So if you were going to, say, outfit me or John, and we're both in a very similar situation where, we've got a couple of young kids going about our daily life, what would you recommend that we put in, say, the car or our EDC?
Great question. Unfortunately, it's never a simple answer. I hate answering with the "it depends" because it's the most annoying answer on earth. But it's ages of children. It's do those children have any special needs? Limitations, things of that nature. And where do you live geographically? Let's face it, he gets a lot worse winters than you and I do. So he's going to probably need
lately.
Yeah. So tailoring it to where and what you're going to encounter in, like, say, a vehicle bag is important. So taking that's what concerns me. And one of the reasons I got into the industry when I got out, one of my last jobs when I was at MARSOC was senior enlisted medical advisors, basically building the kits and training requirements. So I worked with industry a lot. And it really infuriated me that everybody kept trying to build these one-size-fits-all kits and telling me this is what you need. And I kind of took it when I was in my green suit saying, well, you don't know me. You don't know my mission. How do you know what, almost a how dare you thing. And I take that same philosophy when I'm on the other side of the curtain and I come to either of you, I'd be the last person on earth to say, this is what you need without asking the appropriate questions to figure out what is it you really need, because it's different than the person down the street. But are there some common minimum items that I think everybody should have in their vehicle? Absolutely. I think an escalation of ability to handle hypothermia from a initial Mylar blanket to a more like a blizzard blanket or some sort of ways to constantly improve warmth management. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. One in every vehicle is a windlass tourniquet. We can get more on that later if you'd like on it.
I'm not familiar with that.
Any sort of windlass tourniquet. These are the staples that the numbers of people alive this one device can honestly be credited with why we had the lowest number of ratio wounded in the last 20 years of any of the wars in America.
The windlass is the thing you turn, John.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't familiar with
that. It's like you see with the cat. This is an SXT SAM extremity tourniquet.
Okay. Yeah.
The next generation, but some sort of quality, commercially made tourniquet, not one of the wazoo rats or other things you see out there. Something that was put through military testing, special operations evaluation, and field testing that we know works.
So not like Chinese knockoffs that you can pick up for like $5 on eBay.
Yeah, if you see the 3 tourniquets for $15.99, those are airsoft or Halloween tourniquets.
Right. Yeah.
They're and that's fine if you want to go to the airsoft range, but don't trust your kid's life on it.
Mm-hmm. Do they have a use in training?
No, because
you're not even in training
to the level. You're not training with the tools you are going to use in life. And the worst thing that can happen to you if you go off of the rules or instructional theory and rules of adult learning is if something like that breaks while you're training, you're going to lose confidence in it. And no matter how much you try to explain it away later, no matter how much you try to say, no, it's just because I did the Chinese knockoff, somewhere deep down, at least in their deep subconscious mind, they're going to be like, no, I can't trust that tool. And that is a training scar we can't afford.
Mm-hmm.
But tourniquet's a big one there. The items that I mentioned in the minimum kit, tourniquet, ability to manage thermal there. Pressure dressings come in there at some point. Now there's a whole range, like hundreds of different models and stuff out there. The one I personally think is the best is the Olays from TAC Med Solutions. But if you follow the right training methodology, any of them will work. So good pressure dressing with that. And then you start building up from there. There's obviously chest seals. There's a lot of people debate back and forth. Oh, I got duct tape. You're not wrong. But there's some valid tools. Two things that I do believe in carrying a small roll of duct tape in every med kit versus medical tape. And then at that point, you're kind of at the brink of how far down the rabbit hole you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that a good SAM splint is helpful. Well, yeah, if you train with it, but you also have to think about where you live. If you live in a major metropolitan area where EMS is 5 to 10 minutes away, right, the chances of you actually splinting are pretty slim outside of a massive emergency like an earthquake or otherwise. And then you got bigger issues anyways.
Right.
Now living out deep South Dakota or where we do, I do recommend having those in the vehicles, and they are in all my family's vehicles. Mm-hmm. And my family's trained up on how to use them.
Gotcha. Yeah, because there's times where I'm like, 3 hours away in the middle of the grasslands, and it's just myself and a bunch of cows for the next 50 miles or something like that, right?
And you have to think about what is going to be your response if you activate 911, should you have signal. It's very likely to be a volunteer firefighter. And I can say this because I started as a volunteer firefighter. The most well-meaning, amazing human beings on earth that are limited by their training because of how much their counties can invest in them.
Right.
And their training and equipment are not going to be what you're thinking of when you watch a 911 episode on, the nightly TV shows.
Sure. They're not going to have access to all the same equipment or training or anything like that.
Yeah. So that's having that availability to your own. I've had more than one occasion when I have been out on my motorcycle and traveling the grasslands or badlands or any of these other, in between states, as you might call it, or flyover states. And I see a massive wreck. And by the time EMS shows up, I've worked more out of my saddlebag with my equipment than they had in their ambulance when they showed up.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have access to those tools.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have a different set of tools when, let's say, you're like going across country versus like just running down to the grocery store?
Yeah, I've got my minimum that it's very similar to this, just packaged slightly different. That's in my saddlebag. Mm-hmm. And then when I plan for a longer trip, I've got another kit that goes out. And then one of the things in my saddlebags, you were mentioning about getting to this eventually, is just your general boo-boo kit. It's something my wife and I created. We sell these all the time. It's got 4 pills of everything you would need. And what this came from was my first ride out to Sturgis. I'm coming from Washington, and I'm super excited. It's my first long distance ride. I hadn't made it to Idaho before I had to stop at like 3 different CVS's because I didn't have Tylenol. I didn't have Tums and all these little things. And by the time I hit that 3rd one, I'm like, I'm in this industry. I am a subject matter expert in operational medicine. I'm smarter than this, damn it. How did I forget to plan for all this? So I just started a notebook on that trip, and it was a comedy of errors of everything I messed up. And when I got back, I created this. So it's got like Tylenol, ibuprofen, aspirin, 4 of each in pre-packed little 2-packs, refresh eye drops, 2 of those, Benadryl for bee stings, things like that. Stomach, you got some Alkalac, Tums type-ish stuff, dehydration, liquid IV packets, sinus, for sinuses, I've got a phenylpheniramine, which is like a Sudafed version. And then I've got a whole little boo-boo pack for Band-Aids and triple antibiotic.
Right.
So a little bit of everything, but when you go to buy this stuff, when you forget, just 1 pill pack costs like $5. So I buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I sell them off as a package, a little bit of everything for everybody, about 12. Everybody wins. And basically learn from my mistakes type thing. So that's definitely in the kits as well.
No, that's cool. One thing, talking about gear, what are some things that maybe people to avoid that they've kind of been propagandized into thinking that they need? So what is like one of the more overrated items in your opinion?
Well, you guys already hit the one that I was most concerned about, and that is the fake tourniquets. The most common thing I see out there is well-meaning people see a deal online for tourniquets and they get one for $10. Honestly, most of the tourniquets online and most of the quality tourniquets that are approved in quality all run roughly between $28 to $40. If you're spending less than $25 on a tourniquet, you're getting some sort of copy or knockoff, and you're doing it at your own peril. So getting the quality gear, when I build kits out for people, that's one of the comments I get quite often is this isn't a Cintas, Chinese, grab bag. All this is quality stuff I remember using when I was in the service or I've seen at my fire department or things like that. Making sure you're buying quality, not quantity there. As far as items that are overrated, one of the biggest things, I know it sounds odd, is the containers. I see more people spend money on sexy multicam, super tactical, freaking, I'm the coolest guy. I saw this on this podcast, or I saw this on that SEAL Team 6 TV show, and they spend all their money, over half of their budget, on a container that looks super cool, and then leave only a little bit for the actual contents.
I mean, I bought my fair share of black multicam equipment that, was overpriced and didn't provide any additional benefit, but it is quite funny.
We all have.
Right.
When it comes to medical gear, the ironic thing is I can always tell when I'm dealing with agencies or individuals that have been in a gunfight or actually been shot or had to help somebody sucked up around, because they're like, I want something that stands out from all my tactical. So like I've literally had people say, no, I want a red, or I want it in my whole gear is in black, so I want this in tan, or my whole gear is in tan, I want this in black. So that when I'm looking for it, I can find it.
You're telling me that as a civilian, I should not be spending $150 on an LBT IFAC.
$150 is actually a good price for a quality tourniquet, quality IFAC. That's about an
for
average
just the
price
pouch.
Oh, the pouch?
Yeah.
If you're spending more than $40 on the pouch, you're getting bent.
Yeah, I mean you can pick up like decent like surplus gear for not that much money. Like Venture Surplus has a bunch of that sort of stuff for really affordable prices. But I mean, if
And
you're
put
looking
it
for
in
overpriced
context.
nylon, you can always find it.
Yeah, and to put it in context, when everybody's like, "But I want to emulate the people that are doing this for real and stuff." When I was at the height of my career, 2012, my last combat deployment, I was a ground force commander, lead medic in Marine Special Operations. As close as I'll get to being the cool guy, and I know there's always a level above, but
Mhm.
it was a glorious deployment. And oddly enough, I had gotten comfortable enough and trained, invested so much in my training and knowledge at that point, and was gearing towards my tactics that I didn't even carry a med kit on me. I had my personal IFAC, but all of my med gear for my guys was pocket trash in my pockets,
Really?
pre-staged, because I needed to stay light and effective to be able to get to my guys, fight my way to my patient, and fight my patient back to the vehicle, where I had everything in the kitchen sink ready to go.
Mhm.
But none of my tactics, which should drive your medicine by doctrine, none of my tactics were leading me to staying on the X or being in the ground.
Mhm.
Oh, cool. We got the co-host.
Bruce is coming in here. Let me get this guy out of here real fast. I'll be right
He's got some
back.
questions.
How you doing, buddy? You got juice?
So I got a couple of questions while John's dealing
Yeah.
with Bruce there. First of all, how do you feel about super glue and an IFAC?
Absolute must if you're dealing with a canine IFAC. So
Okay.
I saw a lot of those or work with people in their canines. If you're trained to its use and you're planning on being in an extended wilderness environment, it's a good idea.
Okay.
If budget isn't a major issue, I would highly recommend getting Dermabond or a medical grade glue because they do work better on skin than the super glue does, and they have less interaction with the wound.
Follow-up question to that. Where can we, as normal people, buy Dermabond or Vet Bond?
I think I saw it at Amazon. I'm not sure, but there's several places you can get it.
Okay.
There's
Yeah,
also
that-
newer tools that are coming out that they're essentially pre-made Ziploc stitches that you glue to the sides and zip up the wound.
Is that like a real
that make
thing?
that whole
I thought that was like a
process.
cheap.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was like a cheap knockoff, like not even worth it thing.
Now, if you get good adhesion, they've got a place in wilderness medicine. Now, are there better
Interesting.
tools as you grow in your knowledge base and your training level? Oh, way better tools out there. But that tool has a place in medicine.
Mhm.
Well, I'm gonna go get one now. I think I saw one at Rite Aid.
Well, don't get one, get two, and try it. Actually, take next time you've got a steak or something, not steak, something with skin on it. Like you drop a buck hunting or something like that. Actually, practice approximating a wound and use one of them before you're dealing with it. Does that make sense?
Well, when I say get one, I mean get one for training. Get one to
Yeah.
try it out.
Well, don't try it on yourself. Don't cut yourself open to see if it works. It's a bad plan.
He's going to come right up the street to my place, and I don't know exactly how that played out.
It's like, it didn't work the way I thought it would. So can you help me out?
I've got your number, and you will get here faster than the ambulance will. So
I guarantee you. But hopefully I didn't go too far down the rabbit hole for you there. But that was kind of I can talk toys all day.
no.
That's perfectly
We
fine.
like
That's what
the
we're
rabbit
for.
hole here.
Mhm.
Another question that I got here. Do you put silica the silica gel packs in the chest seals?
I guess I don't understand the question. Are you talking about like the silica stuff that comes in your mail? Okay, here it is. I'm sorry. Okay, so this was the one that just came in case they get perforated somehow. If they get perforated, then they're just no longer sterile. I wouldn't worry about that, especially with so some seal in the medicine packs. The vac seal, I get it. Okay, thank you. It took me a minute to get my head around that. No, I do not, because the silica packets can create adhesions and cause problems with the seal, the packaging of the medical gear. If it breaks seal, I just either reseal it, or honestly, I rarely vacuum seal my kits much anymore because I want to be able to get to them effectively. I package and I inspect my gear quarterly, and I know whether it's going to have any issues. There's obviously a plate.
Oh, no, sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
Obviously, there's a pro and con debate whether to vacuum seal and pre-stage stuff, especially like the inside the plate carrier kits. I love those from Focus. But the difference being is for those kits, that's medical grade vinyl that's radiographically sealed. It's a totally different ball game than what we do with our food prep vacuum sealers. So bottom line, no, I don't use any sort of moisture type things like that. I use them a lot with my safe and, when I want to keep firearms dried out, but not in my med kit.
Yeah, so I just had a question about like long-term storage. So if you were planning on doing or storing a bunch of medical, is that a good application for vacuum sealing?
The reality is understanding what FDA means by their expiration dates with it. With most trauma gear, they're going to tell you 5 years, no matter what it is. And what they're really talking about is the sterility of the packaging. With the exception of hemostatics or things with an active ingredient, at the end of the day, does it matter if a chest seal is sterile? Does it really matter even if your pressure dressing is sterile if you've already packed it out with a hemostatic? I would argue it's debatable, and personally, it doesn't matter. And as long as your gear is staying dry and safe, you can get some long-term storage out of it. Okay. Cool. Now, when you start getting into your pharmaceuticals and things with active ingredients, that's something you're going to want to set up on a rotation.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier beforehand, but Gary, you had something about the alien gear tourniquet holster or different gear-related items?
So that was, I have a bunch of questions on, things that we need and things that we don't need and things that we think we need and things that we don't need. So let's start off with training that people actually need and training that people actually don't need. So let's start off with the things that we need, with the training that people should absolutely get. And then training that people probably don't need to get.
I would argue if you keep an open mind, any training, even bad training, teaches you something. If nothing else, like don't go to these people again or ask questions. I would say the better answer to your question, I need to reframe it a little bit. How do I know when I'm going to training that I may not need, or maybe this isn't applicable? These are the key things I've found with bad instructors and bad people I've kicked out of my training companies and off my training sites. Any person that deals in absolutes, who stands in front of a group and says, every time this will happen or never this will happen. Those are people that have never been in a real gunfight and never had to use it the appropriate way. I know the dichotomy of me saying never right afterwards. Right. At the end of the day, the irony of that. But at the end of the day, if you hear people dealing in absolutes, that's one. Also, people that are totally brand bought. I'm relatively agnostic to brands. There's some that I really I like better than others because I've used them or I've dug into the science on them. But if someone is totally digged into one brand versus another, that's something to be mindful of and be cautious. But here's the ultimate test if the training you're going to is correct. If they have a problem with you asking questions or ever asking the question why, you need to pull out. You need to stay away, because if there's an instructor in front of you that isn't comfortable and excited by you saying why, then that's someone not comfortable in what they're doing and they're leading you astray. They're regurgitating someone else's materials instead of owning it and becoming a master of their trade. Now, are there young instructors that are growing in it? Sure, but they need to answer. If they don't know the answer, they need to say, I don't know. I'm going to get you that answer. But they should be excited about people asking questions they know the answer, because they're about to learn something. If an instructor is not a lifelong student, they shouldn't be in front of you. So that's kind of a little bit of a disclaimer, but it's my trade. I consider myself a lifelong student, and I'm very passionate about instructional theory. I would say the minimum training, every human, if you have a pulse, you should go to some sort of stop the bleed training. This is a nationwide initiative across the country. It's not tactical based. It's actually geared towards soccer moms. The smallest versions of these are 1 hour classes. They've got 3 hour, all day, 3-day versions. Stop the Bleed Coalition's a great one that I'm familiar with, and then also First Care Provider puts out some great ones. American College Surgeons, a few others have some versions, but those are the two that I recommend the most: is the Stop the Bleed Coalition and First Care Provider. Those are cabinet level programs that owned by Department of Homeland Security that actually have a standard set for things like tourniquets. They teach you how to use tourniquets, how to have awareness, how to read a scene, how to handle a situation, how to use a hemostatic, how to use a pressure dressing. And they package it in a quick, easy way that everybody can buy into.
Yeah, and those are classes that everybody should be taking. You know, not just like us, but like, you know, wives, maybe even kids and stuff like that, just to understand the basics of using these tools that are, by definition, life-saving tools.
And the beauty of the Stop the Bleed initiative versus your classic American Red Cross first aid classes, Boy Scouts first aid, things like that, is a lot of those curriculums are hindered by lawyers. They have been so rote and hindered by, you know, they won't grow and evolve. Stop the Bleed adopts and adapts the lessons we learned overseas. They're instantly trying to get it to the streets to help everybody learn from it. And that's what I love about it. It bypasses all the bureaucracy, basically, and gets those lessons packaged in easy to consume format that everybody can read to easily adopt and implement into their lives. So that's the bare minimum class. Now, obviously, shameless plug, I mean, I want people to come to my classes, but at the end of the day, find the class that is oriented on your daily life. If you are absolutely part of the tactical life, you know, you want to get out there and do your AR and everything else, you do all this stuff, absolutely go to a tactical medicine class. It's a great, not only is it great for what to do if you soak up around, but it's actually going to help your target placement. Once you learn human anatomy better, you know where to put rounds on better.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah.
A classic example of that is, what's the Mozambique drill?
Two to the chest, one to the head. Mm-hmm.
What's the more effective one that's becoming more common now?
A lot to the everywhere?
No. 2 to the pelvis, 1 to the head.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
You bypass armor and you eliminate mobility and then finish with the head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one, because especially if you're going up against someone that is a near peer, and if you're wearing armor and they're wearing armor to get around that, yeah, that's interesting.
But even without armor,
didn't Paul Harrell come up with that?
Of them coming closer to you.
Yeah. Wait, Gary, did you say did Paul Harrell come up with that?
Yeah, I think I saw that on one of Paul Harrell's videos.
Oh,
I'm not sure about that.
I actually learned it from a doctor.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really? We did have a question come in from Isaiah Elander, and he asked, I learned that the tourniquet is the last resort if pressure and packing does not stop the bleeding unless it's obviously severe enough for a TQ. Is that accurate? So he learned that it was the last resort.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what I learned when I first started medicine in 1988. And honestly, as a combat medic, when I first started, I was taught that all the way up until the early 2000s. There's a fascinating book called Tell Them Yourself It's Not Your Day to Die. It's written by Frank Butler. It was just released last month, and it highlights the whole progression of how we got to where we are for the Committee for Tactical Combat Casualty Care. This is the gold standard worldwide for trauma management, and is the reason we had so few people come home in coffins from the global war on terror. One of the key principal things, the first thing they identified, was the absolute need for tourniquets to be forward deployed and forward trained. And the human use data since then has totally disabused all the myths regarding tourniquets. So I'll address them from the top down, because it's a great question that people get concerned about. It used to be said that the moment you put a tourniquet on, might as well write a line there because you're going to lose the limb below it. We have proved that time and time again to be false. I personally worked on a casualty for over 6 hours who had no issues afterwards after the tourniquet was released in the hospital. and could toast me with a beer on that arm later on after we got back. No issues whatsoever. Now, obviously, we try to keep them under 4 to 6 hours, but at the end of the day, the loss of blood is far more concerned than the loss of limb.
Sure.
And there's quite a few other misnomers that basically all boil down to, if I put a tourniquet on, they're going to spontaneously combust. Not true. At the end of the day, we have if anybody wanted to reach others, if you go to deployedmedicine.com, prolongedfieldcare.org, or just about Stop the Bleed Coalition, all these different things have all the data, the studies, the human use studies, all those different things. So you can study it for yourself. Please don't take my word for it, and don't take whoever told you that's word for it. Go to the studies and read it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's places you can go and you can look up local training and all the sort of information you could possibly want, or just online literature as well. So
absolutely. But great question about tourniquets, because that's one I get pretty regularly, and I cannot advocate enough for how important this is. And I'll just demonstrate it right now if you want, how simple it can be. Massive femoral here, or not femoral, brachial or major issue on my arm here. This is how fast you can stop arterial bleeding. Yeah, my watch is going crazy, saying I've lost my pulse.
It's like something's going wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
So do you
I feel like you've done that a few times.
Do you like those tourniquets better than cats?
I do, drastically more. And the number one reason for it is what you heard there, is this eliminates the two most common problems with tourniquet application for failures. The number one problem is people don't use them when they should, for fear of use, or they're like, oh, I don't know if that's enough bleeding. So when in doubt, tourniquet out, because there's far less likely you're going to cause damage. The number two and growing problem as we get away from the war, and so many people have used them before, is this action of going like this. People aren't tightening them enough before they to the windlass. That's why they're doing multiple turns and wondering why it's not working. Sam Medical came up with a device here on the tourniquet that was actually very helpful for that. And it's a pressure release on here that when you hit it, you heard that click, that's two little teeth popping out that just locked it into place and informed me audibly, you've gone far enough. I pre-stage here. Now it only takes me one turn, at least with my arm in that use there, and I'm done. Notice I pulled this through the bail and then closed it off.
So that's like almost like a little lock on there.
Not only a lock, but it's pressure related. So it reads, it's pressure, the springs detent at the appropriate pressure that you need to do. Versus just guessing it with any of the other tourniquets. Which guessing is fine if you train regularly with a tourniquet. If you're practicing with a tourniquet every month, you probably don't need a click thing. Although I think it's good to have an audible return. But how many people actually will honestly train with a tourniquet every month?
I mean,
not me. You should.
I've definitely trained in the last year.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean,
I put it on when I got it.
That's where, Sam's motto of engineering for survival, I like it. They engineered a solution that helped with that massive problem.
That's the first time I've seen those, so I was not familiar with those going in.
So one of the things that John had mentioned was this guy right here, this tourniquet system right here, from Alien Gear, and this is like a leg strap that's also a tourniquet. I'm not sure what the approval is. What do you think of something like this?
I got to go back to the number one rule of tactical combat casualty care. Tactics drives medicine, never the other way around. Very few people I know that carry a gun for a living are using leg straps on their holsters anymore.
Oh, okay.
Last time I carried a leg strap holster was 2006. So my concern with this is going to drive people to go back to leg straps and pick up all the issues we had of getting in and out of vehicles, crawling over fences, getting hung up on things, the gear bomb approach. It's why people crept up and started going to a more minimalist approach for tactical encounters and bringing everything up to their workspace. So my first concern is that people will leverage a medical device to provide bad tactics. 2, it's going to be difficult for them to get human use studies on this and show its effectiveness in the field when it's attached to a holster. That's not exactly something the FDA gets really hot on. And you're going to at best get anecdotal studies. Now, I will say this, a good friend of mine is very involved in this project, and he has assured me that he's taking care of everything, and I trust him. That he's going to do good things with this. So I'm just going to say I'm reserving judgment, but those were my initial things. And I told them that. I told the folks at Alien Gear that those are my concerns. Now, if it saves lives, if it saves even one life, God bless them for making it work. But it takes I have a really high bar for what I approve of and I advocate for, and we're just not there yet.
Now that, if I'm seeing that correctly, that is a tourniquet built directly into like the retaining strap on.
They've replaced the retaining strap with the tourniquet, basically.
Right, gotcha. Which is an interesting idea for sure, because I do run a drop holster on a Safariland 6354, but that works great on the flat range. But yeah, anytime I'm getting in and out of a car or doing something like that, it's not quite as fun. So
for a 3-gun comp, I'd be all about it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, exactly. It works great on the flat.
If you're needing your tourniquet on the 3-gun comp, somebody got squirrely.
Yeah. Something bad happened at that point.
But what like I said, I'm kind of just reserving judgment on that and where it goes forward. If it ends up taking off, more power to them. I just hope, my biggest concern is we saw a period right around 2009, 2010, especially when guys were losing so many legs. You're welcome. Truly my pleasure. But like it got so bad in Afghanistan at one point where guys were getting tattoos on their lower shin that said, "If found, return to Fob Robinson." Their legs were getting blown off that much. Some gallows humor, but it was getting that bad that some guys were talking about pre-staging tourniquets in their growing area, kind of like bikini line, holding them kind of tight, not to cut off things, but just to have it ready. Right. And some tactical pant makers started trying to sew in a sleeve. It got so crazy that finally we just kind of said, stop the madness, because what we were finding is growing funk, butt funk, sweat, all the stuff that we get into when we're in the field now is degrading the quality and efficacy of that tourniquet. To where to where if you train to it correctly, you should be able to apply it in under 15 seconds.
Yeah, I mean that's a crazy circumstance where you're pre-staging your tourniquets on your body.
Well, there's units out there where we're pre-staging IVs before missions.
Really?
I was not a big advocate of it, but some people will go to the mat saying it was the way to go. And that's the greatest thing about operational medics is you put 10 of us in a room, you'll come out with 20 plus different answers.
Right. Well, and you can get such specialized, specific applications for exactly what you happen to be doing right there. That doesn't necessarily work in a wider context, but for those guys in that specific application, it made sense. Right.
Yeah. And that's why, if you kind of picked up, I'm really hesitant to ever answer a definitively one way because there is so many different applications, but I will always start with the why, which is also a great book. But that why, if I can't answer the why we're doing something, I'm going to really struggle and fight and study and figure it out.
All right. So, Gary, you had a question in here about Narcan or Narcant.
Yeah. For us here, what do you recommend? Do you recommend Narcan, or do you recommend that we don't bother? If you do recommend Narcan, injectable or nasal, and follow up, if we are in fact carrying Narcan, one of the two, where do we go for training?
Good series of questions. First off, training is really simple. Follow the instructions on the side of the thing. It's one of the simplest tools ever out there. It's an EpiPen is more challenging than a Narcan administrator. Preference on administration is nasal. Anytime I can carry less needles, I'm all about it. If I ever need, just take a walk in Seattle. You kick enough needles. I don't want any more.
Right.
So I would much rather the nasal inhalant. It works just as well. As far as Narcan versus Narcant, as you put there, this is not a medical question. This is an ethical and damn near political question. Because anybody with 2 cents to rub together can see that there's a benefit to having a tool that reverses opioids. There's nothing wrong with that. My favorite scene in a medical movie was Bringing Out the Dead, and the whole thing, and the kid's all doped out, and he does the religious, sermon joke over the kids, and you are healed by the power of Jesus, and then he hits him with the Narcan, and the kid pops out. I love that scene. But at the end of the day, are we enabling people? And I'm not going to answer one way or another, but it's an ethical question we need to be discussing. And that's not for me to tell one person one way or another. And we have people that who struggle with addictions and everything else. And I wish them all every power forward, but I know I personally do not carry it.
Okay.
And I think there's a whole bigger discussion to be had there.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't carry it for ethical reasons.
I don't carry because I don't have the room. I would much rather carry one more tourniquet than a thing of Narcan.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I've known people in certain industries, whether it be like social services or psychologists, even depending on who they're working with, where they will have Narcan on them, and they have actually had to use it. So
now I have Narcan in my SWAT team rig bag, not because of people on the street, but in case one of my fellow teammates gets an accidental exposure when we're taking down a drug lab.
Interesting.
So that I do carry it there, but that's more operationally based. So back to it depends.
Right, exactly. Everybody's favorite answer. It depends.
It's sad, but it's applicable.
I
apologize if these are too in-depth of answers. Please.
Oh, no. You are perfectly fine, sir.
I'm a paid professional geek.
Okay. So, we're all parents here. What do you recommend for pediatric preparedness?
Leashes and muzzles.
That's the correct answer.
I got the people called on me last time I tried that.
No, at the end of the day, the beauty of pediatrics is pediatric trauma, not pharmaceuticals, but pediatric trauma, for the most part, is pretty much similar to adult trauma as far as the tools we use and the ways to approach it. The one plus side, they're typically lighter, so I can get them out of there quicker. And I can move them to safety. The one limitations that you want to watch out for is many versions of the windlass tourniquet won't work on little people.
Okay.
So you may need to go to a SWAT T or a Slishman constricting device, one of the other ones that are a wrap approach.
Right.
And people will fight up and down. Yes, they will work. And if you do this, I'm like, if I have to adjust the tool to the size, then it's not appropriate. So there's other tools that work well, but the beauty of anybody pretty much under 6 years old, what also works as a tourniquet is just grabbing and holding really tight around the limb until you get the tool. That's one big one. And another thing is I can't emphasize the need on the heat here as well. They will lose temperature much faster. I know it seems like I keep kicking that horse, but it's one that doesn't get addressed enough. And then pediatrics have a higher incidence of accidental poisonings and exposures just due to their curiosity of doing silly things. So what I've seen sadly in some cases is you're drawn to the trauma when they fell down a set of stairs, but why did they fall down the stairs? Was it because they're a clumsy kid, or did they just get done playing under the kitchen sink and got exposed to some organophosphates? rat poison or something like that was
Right.
So there's being mindful of why a child is in the state they are. Now, more often than not, it's going to be because they were curious and stupid
Right.
and learning things the hard way, as we all did.
Mhm.
But keeping a high index of suspicion for the why. Those would be my top 3 things to be concerned with kids.
Now, we did have somebody come in, and Alan, from a few minutes ago when we were talking about Narcan, he says, if you can carry something that saves a life as a 16-year sober addict, congratulations, sir. It's great to hear. You never know what will change a person's life that may push them to seek help. I agree.
I couldn't agree more, and more power to you.
And yeah, congratulations.
There's a
16 years
bigger
is a long
discussion
time.
to be had there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, addiction is a crazy thing. So. All right. We got just a couple more questions to go through. We kind of talked about this a lot, the difference between individual medical, for like yourself prepared citizen or like your vehicle setup. But one of the things you talked to me about a little bit earlier was like some of your security guys and your company that you work with for that. And can you kind of walk us through some of the differences that some of those guys might need versus like LE military or even guys like us, just prepared citizens, let's say?
Well, in the security world, we actually issue the same kit as a starting point. But it's more about understanding if you're doing personal or executive protection or personal security to someone, is understanding their needs and building a kit around their needs. It's one of the few times you can really target down and make something just for an individual.
Right. Whatever gets this guy through.
When you back it up, that's when the questions like Narcan and other things like that come up quite a bit. Are we in an area where we have a higher incidence of this happening that we want to be able to respond and make a difference? And quite a few of my security guards, we dictate to them to carry Narcan and actually train them up on it.
Gotcha.
So that's actually a classic example follow from the Narcan thing is I do usually have my security guards carrying some sort of Narcan as well as a small basic kit like that, an everyday carry. Okay, now, gotcha. Once they become armed, we make sure they also carry a tourniquet as well.
Mm-hmm. And now, when it comes to medical in your kit, let's say, we could talk about that for a minute. Now, you said at the end of your deployment, you basically just had everything stuffed in pockets because you had everything figured out basically at that point. You had a lot of experience doing it. But for like just the everyday Joe, we talked about this too. You want to have access to it. So wherever it is, probably have access to it with both hands, not like something where if your left arm goes down, but only your left arm can reach it, well, then it's not all that useful at that point now, is it?
So yeah, it goes into which tool you're talking about. And it's applicable whether you're in the military or private, anything else. If you're carrying a tourniquet and just one, it needs to be midline applicable, able to get from either hand. And I use the analogy of if you're practicing and setting your gear up for speed reloads on your pistol. Does it go on the same side as your pistol, or do you go offhand so you can get to it real easy and do your reloads? Same principles apply here, is go to what you need to do and what the end state goal is. And that's to be able to reach from either arm under stress and remove and apply to a wounded limb in under 15 seconds.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what Gary was pointing at there.
No, that's nothing.
Oh, okay. Well, do you have a preferred tourniquet holder that you go to, like on a belt, or do you just stuff it in a pocket and call it good?
No, I never put it in my pocket if I can avoid it, unless it's a dedicated pocket out on a sleeve. Just because that's when I guarantee if I did that, there'd be a Jolly Rancher or a piece of chocolate right there.
Right.
So
crunched up paper would never happen to be left in there.
You want a clean pull when you go for it. And there's several different universal tourniquet holders out there. I've helped design several of them, so obviously I'm partial to the ones I design. But if you're going to buy a tourniquet holder, get a universal.
Show away. Pardon me? Show away. That's what you're here for.
I actually don't have it right here on me. I didn't know the thing grabbed that one. But either way, you're looking for anything that says universal tourniquet holder, because if you try to get the sexy Kydex ones that are made only for a specific brand of tourniquet, what happens when you want to trade up tourniquets? Or they come out with a new generation that it doesn't fit anymore. If you get a universal tourniquet, it may be just a little bit bigger, but you can get every type of tourniquet in there. And if you want to try out different ones and stuff, they're right in line. So if you're paying more than 30 to 35 bucks for it, you got an issue.
Right. So yeah, you end up with a useless piece of plastic after just a few years, or even shorter than that, especially if like you said, you're trying out a different tourniquet. Now you got to get a different tourniquet holder for it. So
the characteristics of it, though, is make sure that it fully encapsulates or covers the tourniquet to prevent UV exposure, salt air, all the different stuff that gets around. You want it fully covered.
That's funny. Do you have a specific place you like to carry it? Like I mentioned, like a belt, or like what's your EDC style for that?
So every day, I don't carry one. If I'm carrying a firearm, I'll carry it in my inside jacket pocket right here. So if
okay, gotcha. So it is like actually right on your spine.
Or in my gun belt, I've got it horizontal draw right at the buckle. Right.
Oh, okay.
Right on the right hand side of the buckle, because I've got my pistol mags right here. So it's just off to the right.
Gotcha.
But I can get to it from either side.
Have you seen those T-Rex arm sidecar holsters where it's designed for whatever your gun is, and then an extra magazine right off the holster itself? But then they also sell secondary add-ons that can do tourniquets. They can do all sorts of like handcuffs and a bunch of other things that you can actually mix and match with your holster.
Companies do that, but the problem is those are usually the Kydex ones.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in selling my soul just to one brand.
Okay. Gotcha.
So sorry.
Byron's coming in with a live super chat.
A live super chat. He has a question. What's up, Byron?
Okay. So how much have you had to deal with major chemical burns or just burns in general? And also, what are your thoughts when it comes to SAM splints? I always think they're a little bit chintzy, and is there like a better option that's a little bit stiffer that actually provides some support?
Fair. I'm going to handle those in three parts because there were really three different questions buried in there. Great questions, though, so definitely worth approaching here. Chemical burns. Anything chemical, solution to pollution is dilution. All right. Solution to pollution.
That was a lot. I didn't.
So if it's a chemical, the solution to pollution is dilution, unless you have a counter agent, which I don't carry around a big antidote kit with me in most cases. So basically think fire hose or dunk them in the sound is one of your best bets if you're dealing with massive some sort of chemical burn. Now, are there exceptions to that? Absolutely. Certain dry chemicals, base versus acid, that's a class unto itself. But a raw cover about 80% of the solutions is the solution to pollution is dilution.
So just add water, basically?
As much as you possibly can.
That's interesting.
In volume. That's going to cover the majority of your chemical issues. Now,
is that something that you ran into?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, especially in Iraq. That was a nasty, nasty country. But I've seen most of my chemical burns over time actually out of kitchens.
Oh, yeah.
So just things that we keep under the sink, like I mentioned earlier, the organophosphates, bug sprays, things like that. In most cases, though, just getting a good amount of fluid over it is a good starting point. With certain exceptions, probably be better for a class. Now, thermal burns on themselves, that's a real messy one. The number one thing that gets overlooked that really scares me, and I have been remiss. I realized recently when I was doing a review of several of my students that went on to encounter thermal burns and happening to get on body cam, I was missing the boat. I was inducing a training scar. So I'm going to say it here, and I say it every chance I get a platform for it. The number one thing you can do for a thermal burn is put the fire out. I know it sounds stupid. I know it sounds silly, but when we fail to train to that critical step, we fail it in real life. Because we don't rise to the occasion on your worst day ever. We just don't. 80s movies screwed us on. 80s action movies screwed us on that. We think there's going to be a training montage, really kick-ass hairband music, and we're going to rise up and we're going to Rocky this thing. We will be a Rudy moment. The reality is that we're left with is we actually fall to our lowest level of consistent training. So it's really important. I wanted to emphasize that. Put the fire out. Have things available to put different types of fire out, like cold fire. Cold fire is a great tool. Works on every type of fire out there to include chemicals, and costs about as much as a fire extinguisher. And it's safe for human skin use, and immediately cools the thing down. So having those tools available, it's something in my vehicles I have.
You said that was called cold fire?
Cold fire. The one that I prefer is cold fire tactical. It's just a little canister this big, and you just spray it on there and go.
Okay, so it is a spray application.
Yeah, it's a wet gummy spray. They still have a proprietary thing. Won't tell anybody what it is. I'm fairly certain it's unicorn tears, because it's the only thing that got EPA cleared to actually put into storm drains.
Interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, Byron's a welder over by Safe Boats, if you know where that's at. And he's constantly complaining about being on fire almost every day. So I think he's looking that up right now.
This was really got highlighted during the riots in 2020 when the rioters were throwing Molotov cocktails at the cops.
Right.
Worked exceptionally well. And that little one right there works great, goes right into a magazine holder.
I mean, that's pretty cheap too, $30 to put out a fire. That's not bad.
And the 12-ounce one there we'll put out, and I've tested this, we'll put at the top end of an engine fire out, not a full engine, and we'll put it will extinguish half of a human.
Okay, gotcha. So anything other than a full engulf.
Yeah.
Like
and honestly, there's an 18-ounce one, slightly larger, that actually will handle a whole human. Or 20 ounce.
Some humans are bigger than others. Like, what kind of a human are we talking about here?
The average human.
Come over sometime. I'll show you the video how I proved that when we were testing it.
Will do.
But so putting the fire out, huge piece of that. Then after that, you have two things that you can do in the field to make a difference. Use a dry burn dressing or a wet burn dressing. Dry burn dressings are just a sterile dressing that allows for thank you, appreciate it. Lots of uses beyond it for cravats, everything else. And the goal is just to prevent UV, air, everything that's going to hurt and damage or infect that wound. A wet dressing like water gel, I'm a huge fan of because it starts minimizing and eliminating some of the pain, bringing their blood pressure down and helping manage it. And there's some pros and cons with water gel when you start getting into a class environment, but those are your two options, dry and wet. I carry both in all of my vehicle kits.
Gotcha.
I think I broke that question together. Did I hit all the key points of that?
Was there a
third I think so. That was
question?
Fantastic.
Oh no, it was the splints. The splints.
Oh, splints. Happen to have one of those right here. I would argue that this is the gold standard for splinting in the field. Prior to the sample being created was nothing but vacuum splints and wooden splints.
Okay.
And articulating splints, which work, but when ounces make pounds and pounds make misery in my pack, something that is this light, malleable, and adjustable, and I stopped counting at over 100 different uses for the thing. If you're finding that there's not enough rigidity, you might want to go back, and I've got some great training tools for it, but what you're looking to do is either do a T-weld approach like this,
okay,
or a really good gutter forming, because you're absolutely right. If you just keep it like this, it's very flimsy. But the way it's designed to be done is to be shaped for strength.
Gotcha. Interesting. Because I have one of those sitting in that green bag right there.
Yeah.
So that's
if you go to the website, there's all sorts of different things you can download for instructions and ways to form them out for every type of fracture out there. And also some amusing things like how to make this into a dog bowl, how to make this into a coffee cup warmer, all sorts of different things, but ways to use it for a neck splint, all sorts of different stuff out there. I've even basically jerry-rigged a boot for a guy whose whole boot came off, and I jerry-rigged this up for a sole for a boot to get through a hike.
Now, is there like a strap or something else, like a wrap you would recommend to go with that?
Plain old A strap. Plain old A strap. Gotcha. One thing you got to make sure is whatever you do with any sort of fracture or splinting is it's got to be ready for the swelling that's coming. So don't use duct tape or something that won't swell with the limb.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Gotcha. Yeah, I think that eliminated those three questions perfectly. Awesome. Well, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but you had mentioned you've had so much experience in so many different applications, from your time in the military to now being out and training other people and doing that sort of thing. And that one of the best things for your own teaching is learning from your own mistakes. So I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through some of that and how, your own testing and training has changed over the years.
Sure. Yeah, that became very apparent to me soon after I got out into my first tour in Iraq. I realized the importance of the word why. There were so many things that we took as gospel from our instructors, gospels as tribal community. In 2005, when I got back from my first OIF tour, I'd been in some form of medicine for 10 to 15 years. And I thought I was pretty slick. I thought I was all over it. And in those days, the tribal gospel was you weren't a medic if you didn't get two large bore IVs in both arms and come barreling into the ER with that. And we didn't realize we were killing our patients. We were rapidly cooling them with cool clear crystalloids. We were blowing out clots. We were turning their RBC into non-viable blood carriers. We were causing all sorts of problems and setting up fatal triads. All because in our hubris, we wanted to be that guy who could get two large bore IVs. And I never asked why until I saw the challenges that came with it. So backing up, once I made that and I had that gut punch, realizing that my hubris was hurting people I cared about, it made me question everything. And once I started looking at everything from a highly suspicious nature, and I sit in every class with the why up front, it really changed not only how I attend classes, but how I go through life, how I assess equipment, how I assess tactics, training, protocols, the law. I mean, everything out there. I look at everything through that prism of why, and it's really helped me. That was the number one lesson I took from all the years of war was never fail to question or never always question why.
Gotcha. Right. Awesome. Yeah. Always question, always learn rather than just going along with what you've been told, I guess. Sweet. Now that kind of leads us into the final little thing that we have to talk about, and that is your company mission statement, which is, I believe, no ego, all in.
It's more of a, not only is it a company mission statement, I actually burned it into my arm, and it is my life ethos now. When I was in the service, we had my unit or my group that I was with, the Special Operations Independent Duty Corpsman and SARCs. We had a very arrogant motto, and I think we lived up to it. It was the difficult anytime, the impossible by appointment only. And a little cocky, but we strove every day to live up to it. When I got out into business and retired, and you don't have that team to back you up when you might falter, I realized I needed to look at the world a little differently. And I realized that hubris, that ego was getting in the way of things quite a bit. So it took some time. And then once I realized that I could check my ego, I'd never get to a point where I have no ego. I don't know if that's even possible, but if I strive every day and I take a hard pause before everything of importance, a podcast, in a class I'm teaching, a presentation, a meeting at work, if every time I take a breath before I walk into it and say to myself, no ego, all in, I'm removing my ego from this for the sake of others, and I'm all in for the mission of what we're about to do. Every time I've done that and I mean it, things go well. Every time I stray from it, things tend to go to hell. So it's more than a mission statement. It's kind of a life ethos.
Right. And I mean, that's something really cool to hear, because you end up with people that have done things for, like you said, like 10 to 15 years, and they never get past that stage of believing that they know everything and that their word is gospel. And, that can come back and bite them in the butt a little bit later on.
Yeah, I went from about that mid 15 range and thinking I knew everything. Now I'm well past 30 years in operational medicine, and I question everything, including myself. So,
well, isn't that the Dunning-Kruger effect? Isn't that the one? It's when you know a little bit, you think you know a lot, and then the more you actually know, the less you think that you know.
Yeah, I don't even know. It's probably been packaged by so many different things. It's just part of having the blessing of getting older.
Mhm.
Waking up on the right side of the dirt when so many better men than me didn't come home. Trying to commit myself to living for their memories and making something happen. What more is there to wake up for every day? How can you have a really bad day with that mindset, you know?
Well, yeah, when you're the one waking up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, we really appreciate you having on and taking the chance to chat with us about this sort of stuff, because this is really cool. A lot of stuff that I personally don't have a lot of knowledge on. So it's always good to talk to somebody who does have so much experience and comes at it from a very humble perspective. It is, again, quite refreshing. Before we go, though, is there anything that you want to talk about? Where can people find you, companies that you work with, etc.?
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity for that. We've inadvertently plugged a few things as we've gone through here, but I get the blessing of in my first retirement to work with who I want to work with, not who I need to. So the people I work with are people I trust and believe in. Easiest way to get hold of me is the blair.dell@gmail.com that's been up while we've been doing this. Some of the companies I'd like to highlight that I work with regularly is Sam Medical. They're a manufacturer of some amazing tools out there. I run in their training department that's going to have seeing a lot of exciting things coming out here shortly. And new learning management systems, ways to train, all sorts of fun stuff coming out soon. And then from there, we're going to, and yes, if you were trying to put it together, that is the same place that this came from.
Right.
And then another company I work with, really blessed to work with as a risk navigator, is the Firewatch Solution. Great company that's develops holistic solutions for everyday problems in security, whether it be cyber, personal, you name it, they can address it in some way or other. They want to tailor to people's problems instead of build box package solutions. So great company. It's a pleasure of mine to work with them. I've known some of these guys since as far back as the military, and they really create a unique approach that is just a lot of fun to work with. And then finally, my company, 813 Consulting. You won't find much of a cyber footprint with it, but for those that are in our area here in the Western Washington, we're actually doing an event, the Combat Veteran International Rally in Bremerton, Washington, this weekend on Saturday. You can see us there with some summer sale. One of my big things that I push for 813, besides advocating for companies, is motorcycle first responder awareness, M1RA. It's a program that I've been building over the last 7 years, trying to take those lessons learned in my brother's blood and take them to a community I care a lot about out in the motorcycle world. It's been a long evolution, but now we have kind of settled in. And I think we've got a 90% we're there to what right looks like. It's a 3 to 4 hour class designed to be given in a bar.
Okay.
We'll come together and just do a quick class to learn all the stop to bleed type stuff, but how it applies to motorcycle riding and when you lay a bike down. And then be able to get some gear out to folks, these same like everyday carry type stuff geared for motorcycles. Ooh. And it's just fun. I get paid to ride. I get to hang out with like-minded hooligans and pass on good information. So M1RA is a big thing that I love doing with motorcycle clubs, groups, dealerships all around the country. It's one of my personal passions.
Sweet. And now, do you also offer personal training and stuff like that?
I do. The thing with when people ask me, can you train this? If I can't train it to the utmost I possibly can, I'll refer you to somebody who can. But what I prefer to do is customize packages. When people say, hey, I want to learn how to do stuff for my kids, that's one class. But we can tie it in with, oh, you want to learn to do some shooting? We can do this. You want to do some rock climbing? We can do that. Water, amphibious survival. I was a dive school instructor. We can do that.
Right. You can do almost just about anything, which is pretty cool.
If I'm out of date with something, I'll bring in another expert, and we just talk through how to make it work.
And the best place to get in touch with you is going to be your email?
My Gmail account there. Okay. Just a good starting point, because from that small 813 account, we can touch into all of my network of companies I work with.
Right. And I will put your email at the top of the description just in case anybody wants to reach out for whatever reason. So
I certainly appreciate that.
Awesome. Anything else before we get out of here?
Just appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, well, we appreciate you, sir. Gary, you got anything before we go?
I don't think so. I wanted to touch on motorcycle preparedness, but you just did, and I appreciate that. Sounds like we got some other people here that appreciate that as well. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for giving us your time.
I truly appreciate the opportunity, and happy to follow up with anybody if they shoot me an email.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everyone who showed up for the live chat and for everybody watching this later. Thank you very much. And we will see you in the next one. So you guys all have a good night.